Welcome back to the All Turtles podcast, a show about the future of work, the future of health, and entrepreneurs building the future with tech like AI. Today's episode is going to sound a little different. Due to the novel coronavirus and subsequent COVID-19 outbreak, Phil and I are recording this episode remotely from each of our homes in San Francisco. We're also joined by our producer, Marie McCoy-Thompson, who you may have heard on our Startup Playbook and Human Stories of AI podcast series. Today, the three of us are going to talk about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the future of health and a three-phase framework for thinking through how we'll make it to the other side of this together. So we're still sheltered in place, and we're joined by our podcast producer, Marie. Marie, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, really excited to be here. Normally, I'm just in the booth pressing buttons, but today I get to be on the microphone too, so it's kind of fun.
I've been listening to my normal kind of weekly radio shows, and sometimes I listen to Terry Gross, and she keeps talking about the idea of having her workspace, her home, her dinner table, her desk, and now recording studio, and I'm feeling similarly as I have a stack of records propping a mic up towards my face and just kind of like piles of stuff everywhere.
There's been sort of a picture floating around Twitter of Ira Glass recording This American Life from the comfort of his closet. And he's wearing a full suit and has the microphone sort of adjusted in a way that it fits around all of his clothes hanging up. So yeah, we're all just sort of making it work in these times.
It sounds pretty good. I'm right on a pretty main street in San Francisco, so there will be a bus. As I'll try and mute appropriately. I'm right around the corner from the fire station too, so we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, I finally have a mic this week, so hopefully it'll be sounding a little bit better.
There you go.
So how's everyone set up their homes for work-life balance? That's a phrase that's taken on a whole new meaning. For me, it's like, balancing my laptop on a big stack of books is now my work-life balance.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a moving target for me. It's hard to have boundaries on like where work starts and ends, and where I've been doing a lot of cooking. So there's like long form, like Italian grandma in the kitchen making sauce all day. So I'll notice work just kind of bleeds throughout the day into odd hours.
I've been seeing a lot of sort of lists of tips for how to work from home and do it well. And so many of them recommend that you fully get dressed in the morning and put on what you would normally wear to the office. And I tried that for about 2 days. And then I just realized if I can work in sweats, why not?
Yeah, there's no way that anyone making that recommendation is actually like doing it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's, I actually put on we just did an all hands, on video. So I had originally a blazer on because I thought that, hey, why not? Be kind of funny.
Very official.
But no, couldn't actually get myself to wear it for too long. So took it off right before the video started. So I'm in my Mission Cheese t-shirt. I live right across the street from Mission Cheese.
So we have a few things to talk about today. I think we could talk about the kind of global response and, maybe how this is changing people's behavior and approach to healthcare. But I think, Phil, you had kind of like an interesting like 3-part framework for how to think about kind of like before, during, and after how we are going to be in a post COVID-19 world. Can you take us through that a little bit?
Yeah, I've been trying to think about how should we make strategic plans for the new world, and talking to a bunch of CEOs and founders and startup people and investors, and I've kind of got this framework that I found helpful, which is 3 phases. So right now the world is in phase 1, which is kind of thinking of as confusion and paralysis. Everything's just kind of up in the air. People are figuring out what to make of everything. People are just letting things sink in. They're adjusting to this idea. They're figuring out, how do I work from home? How do I take care of kids? How do I take care of kids at home while trying to get work done? Is my family okay? Are my employees okay? How do we communicate? Who should I listen to? Who should I trust on TV? Who should I ignore? All of this stuff is just sinking in. And while that's happening, there's just a lot of confusion. There's a lot of churn, and most people and companies just aren't making particularly big decisions. And during this phase one, which I think we've been in for a couple of weeks, and it feels like it's coming close to an end. Maybe it'll be done, next week, maybe the week after. The main thing we can do is not a whole lot of anything. Just make sure everyone's okay. Figure out how we're going to work. Get all of our communication patterns established. Make sure the tooling is right. Just figure out what the lifestyle is going to be like, and then just make plans. Make plans for phase two. But assume that no one outside of your company is going to do anything rational. Like, assume that no one is going to write big checks or make big buying decisions. Don't push for any decisions to be made, because if you push, you're just going to likely get to a no or get to a yes. They'll just be rescinded later. Don't be too disappointed or surprised if things seem to really just stop completely for the next couple of weeks or the past couple of weeks, because look, people just have really more important things to do, and they're generally panicked and confused. Well, maybe more confused than panicked at this point, but a little bit of both.
Do you think other countries are still in this phase? And I'm looking specifically at like China, Japan, Singapore, Taiwan.
Yeah, it's interesting. Definitely feels like some countries have come out of it. So when I talk to people in Japan or talk to people in Singapore, yeah, they seems like they're out of phase one. Like they're in phase two. They're kind of hunkered down, going through it, but they're executing. They're making decisions. Like a couple of weeks ago, they were still at phase one. There was massive amounts of paralysis and confusion, but things are moving forward at this point. So I think they're just ahead of us by a few weeks in this. But during this phase, my best advice is like, don't do a whole lot of anything. Just make sure everything's together, make sure everything's okay, and then just plan. But this is not the time to make important, irreversible decisions. You will just know a lot more in a week than you do right now. That's been true for the past couple of weeks. So if possible, just avoid doing anything irreversible or significant, and just relax through it. And it'll only last for, again, it may be coming to an end already. And then once this is done, we're in phase two, which is I think some people in some countries already in, which kind of just thinking of as the tunnel, which is just the world living with coronavirus. And this is going to be the next 3 to 18 months where the virus is happening and we're living through it, which means the economy continues. Some industries are really decimated. Some industries are in growth mode. A lot of people are out of work, but life goes on, and people and companies and governments are just figuring out how to get through it. What the new normal is at this point. The stock market is not plunging anymore by vast amounts every day, and it's also not like bounding up that quickly. Like, everything is just the new normal. Everything is like life continues in this phase, but social interactions are still going to be limited. I don't think everyone stays locked up at home for 18 months. I think it's going to be a rolling period of, once we get pretty good monitoring where we can tell if cases are spiking, isolation restrictions can be tightened or loosened as needed. So different cities probably go in and out of lockdown every few weeks. It just becomes a new normal. Sometimes schools are in session and you get to send your kids away. And then sometimes, they're not in session and you have to take care of them. So it's a pretty different life for a lot of people, but it is a life and it is continuing. Hopefully the healthcare system isn't completely overloaded. It'll definitely be strained, maybe overloaded in some parts, hopefully not everywhere. And this goes on for 12 to 18 months. And then it's over. And it will be over. There's really no mathematical modeling that suggests that this doesn't end. So it ends when, the pandemic is over, we have herd immunity and or a vaccine, probably both. And then we were into phase 3, which is recovery, which is things are coming back. People are traveling again. Most of the restrictions are lifted. There's a fairly massive and broad economy. Industries that had been almost completely shut down in phase 2 are ramping back up, quickly. And those are the 3 phases. And the idea is have a strategy for each phase. So if you're making a company or if you're working on anything, like, what is your strategy for phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3? And I've been coming up with what that strategy should be for us, and helping a bunch of other people go through it as well. And there's definitely, some things in common for a lot of the people I talk to, and some things are pretty different.
Yeah, there's something that's strangely reassuring to sort of walk through the fact that right now there is confusion and panic that's pretty widespread. And it's not just me feeling that way. and that we are entering a tunnel. Things are going to be different, but like you said, life moves on and it's just going to be the new normal, and that any tunnel does have an ending and we will get through to recovery, but that there are things that companies can and should be doing now to think through how to approach each of these phases. And the answer, like you said, is not making huge, rash decisions right now, because things are changing so much week by week. And right now on our podcast, our themes for this year have been the future of work and the future of health. And obviously, this is probably the most significant time in recent history when those two things are so inextricably intertwined. And the future of health is drastically impacting how we work. And in many ways, vice versa. The choices that we're making about how we work are impacting the future of health as well. So I think that interaction has been frightening and also interesting to see play out.
Yeah, and we had this hunch that the two were very interconnected, a couple of years ago when we started this. And yeah, it's definitely true. And I think right now, with the pandemic, the health is directly impacting work. But that, as you said, that'll come around, right? Like the way right now, the trying to keep healthy is the biggest effect on the economy and how people are working. But over the medium term, how healthy people are going to be a direct result of how we work right now and what we work on. So that interconnectedness has never been clearer. And it's kind of an exciting time. I mean, it's a very difficult time, but there's also just a lot of ways that we can make the phase 3 world, the recovery world, better than the world that we used to live in a few months ago. That's our obligation.
That's one thing I'm trying to focus on just personally is at the other side of this. Marie, I think you put it well. Like it's not just me. This is really a global shared experience, and it's rare that we have these sort of unifying egalitarian moments. And one thing I'm noticing is like a serious desire to commune more. And there's just it's much easier to relate to one another when everyone is kind of experiencing and feeling the same thing. And, how will that impact how we, for one thing, I'm looking forward to the increased hand washing and just general cleanliness and mindfulness of those around you. I mean, it reminds me of, traveling in Japan. It's just the experience, the consumer experience and the travel experience. Everything is just better. Like it's just better, cleaner, safer.
Yeah, I would not mind if handshaking were to go away permanently. It's not a thing I was ever a huge fan of, and handshaking is like fine, but like the European style, like repeatedly kissing people was always weird because like I never knew like how many times am I supposed to kiss people? What you do it like this in Italy and like that in France, and
I think you just keep kissing until one of you stops. It's like a game of chicken.
I have never done that smoothly. I'm always so awkward about it, and I feel myself getting so hot and sweaty. And it lasts about 2 seconds, and it's always I don't know which side to kiss on, or it's just Right now, talking about it, I'm getting a little upset.
Yeah. So I'm kind of glad that that's done. Probably there are, back when we were all traveling to Europe again, maybe the weird, awkward kissing is a thing of the past.
Yeah, it'll just be just some awkward nodding instead, which is fine.
Yeah, I've settled on the Vulcan salute as my hygienic salutation of choice, but other people have different ways. The nice thing about it is you don't have to coordinate, right? Any of the non-contact salutes, you don't need to coordinate. You just do your own thing. Like the whole problem with handshaking and high-fiving and kissing is like both people have to know how to do it, and that's why people like me who are just kind of doofuses always find it awkward and terrifying. But I can do the Vulcan salute and you can do the Namaste greeting, and it's fine. It works. So everyone does their own thing.
I'm partial to making my hands into the shape of a butterfly and flapping them a few times in greeting.
Infinite diversity and infinite configurations. It'll be a good
It is
thing.
interesting, though, just how the pandemic has already so greatly impacted the general public's approach to health and people paying more attention to hygienic practices. Do you think that this is something that is sort of a temporary reaction to the pandemic spreading, or do you think that these are habits that we will be able to learn and stick with and maybe change the course of future flu-like symptoms or things like that might have spread more quickly if we weren't being so cognizant of these things.
Yeah, hopefully it'll stick. Hard to imagine it not sticking, at least for a few years, but I think a lot of that is just up to us and what we make stick. An important thing that I've kind of realized in thinking through this 3-phase system, right, is just this idea that not everything is happening at once. And just as Marie, as you said, like we're all going through it together. Like the phase 1 idea of, hey, just like chill out a little bit. Don't make any important decisions. Like just that, trivial as it is like kind of important. Every CEO I know, every founder I know is just getting bombarded with, allegedly helpful communications from their investors and things like that about how they have to cut everything. And all of this is extremely stressful and also just wrong. Like it's not, maybe you need to cut, maybe you don't, but what you need first is a strategy. Like you need to do that in the service of some coherent plan. And you don't need to come up with a plan within 48 hours. You do need to come up with a plan within a week or two. For example, a friend of mine has a company that does they do high-end guitar lessons. They basically have this like very intensive guitar program that they aim at intermediate players who really want to get to be excellent. And it's like world-class instructors, and it's a pretty intensive thing. And they were doing great. They were profitable. And when this whole thing started, their sales is a fairly expensive 3-month class. It's all online, so it would be fine, but it's fairly expensive. And their sales went very low. And he was kind of worried about it. We were just talking, and I kind of walked through this 3-phase idea. We actually kind of developed it together a little bit. And I said, look, I just don't worry about what happens this week or last week in terms of sales. Like people aren't in the mood to buy expensive guitar classes this week, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to be in the mood to do it next week because they're going to be at home and they're going to have time. And yeah, they're going to feel, people are going to feel generally less rich, but there'll still be people who have, a lot of time on their hands all of a sudden, and dedication and something to do. And, a week later it came back. A week later he emailed me saying, yeah, I'm actually glad I didn't, take any specific actions just based on everything going to almost zero during 1 week, because, by the next week it's looking okay. And obviously not every company is going to do that, but a bunch of them are. So if you just kind of say, well, oh my God, no one's buying my guitar lessons this week. You're like, yeah, you wouldn't buy them either, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to buy them next week. And it doesn't mean that you need to make any big changes.
So for our listeners, aren't you glad that you tuned in to just get full permission to just relax and just slow down, and it's okay? This is why we put this out there, is Phil is giving you full permission to just take it easy for a little bit. And that's pretty good.
It's also why we put it out there so late. Who knows when this is actually going to air? We may be totally over it with that phase by this point. But yeah, there's no reason to rush the audio editing. It's okay.
One sector that has been sort of doing the opposite thing and really rushing to get things to market is the health tech startup scene, where we've been seeing some startups like, I guess, Carbon Health and Nurx were 2 examples that I saw that were working really quickly to bring at-home testing for COVID-19 to market for people. And I think there have been some interesting opportunities for health tech companies right now to provide services that are really helpful in this moment. I know at the same time, I guess those tests were then therefore sort of put on pause and not getting approval from the federal government to move forward. So that's sort of an interesting hiccup there. But I do think that it is an interesting moment for that particular group of entrepreneurs right now who are doing what they can to help out and see, like Phil, you said, that there are some opportunities for people to make adjustments in what they're doing to be particularly relevant to serving the pandemic, as opposed to some other projects they might have been moving forward with.
And I think the way to think about opportunity in a time of crisis is opportunity to do what? And it's an opportunity to help. That's how I want to think about it. And that's how I try to frame it in my own mind. This is not, I don't think of things as an opportunity to make a good business right now. I think the first opportunity is an opportunity to help. And so if you're doing something, if your company has an opportunity to be maximally helpful to the world, right now, either by rushing over the next week or two, or in phase 2, or while we're in the tunnel over the next 4, 6, 12 months, then great. You should take the opportunity to help. And often, that will convert into a good business. You can kind of think about that during the second half of things. But there are a lot of companies who have an opportunity to help, and they shouldn't be cutting. And in fact, just because they may not be able to expand and get access to capital in the past week or two and during phase one when everyone is panicked and paralyzed, but it doesn't mean they won't have access to capital in a month if they actually have a product that really can help and that's relevant and essential in category 2, in phase 2, I mean. One example, a company that we've had on the podcast a lot, one of the old Turtles companies is Replica, right? They make this, it's basically a bot. It's an AI for, mental health. It's a bot that helps with loneliness and depression. And, Marie, you did a great episode of a Stories of AI about it. And, that's a great example of something that, okay, well, over the past couple of weeks, I don't know that I would expect a whole lot of things to happen, but over the next few months, while we're in the tunnel, while the world's in phase 2, like the need for a really high quality AI that can help people isolated and working at home just feel better is huge. It's bigger than it was before all this thing started. And actually, several of our projects are like that. So I think rather than having this like generic advice about, well, okay, everything needs to be cut back, we need to be in survival mode, like, well, some projects do and some projects don't, and some projects may be pivoted to ones that don't. And the guiding light, the North Star here is, do you have an opportunity to help during the tunnel, during phase 2? And if you do, then you should make a plan for scaling and for helping, and you can be successful in that plan. Just, not last week.
I think that, like you said, Phil, there are a lot of opportunities to sort of assess what it is that your company is doing, whether or not now is the time for you to really be building, or whether you should just not worry so much about being highly productive in this moment. Maybe your company is not one that needs to be raising money right now. It might not make sense for you, and that's okay. We will be entering a tunnel, and then eventually we will be reaching recovery. And all of these things have a huge impact on the future of health and the way that we are reacting to this pandemic. And the more that we are being proactive in the work that we do and the choices that we're making, obviously the better that will be for the health of the world in many different ways.
Yeah, and as a lot of people say, the silver lining here is the innovation to come out of it to make the post-coronavirus world in a year and a half or 2 years, to make it significantly better as a world, as a society than the pre-corona world. And that's possible. That's happened before with these crises. In fact, almost all the time.
Right.
I think the thing about that, though, is that that's not a passive thing. You don't get to just sit back and hope that happens. It's our responsibility to make it so.
And until then, we will be wearing our sweatpants and
and washing our hands.
Washing our hands. Yep.
That's a pretty good life. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for all your insight, as always. It definitely helps me personally just to sort of have a different framework for how to think of what's happening to the world right now and where we're headed.
Thank you. Nice to talk to everyone.
See you all virtually. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
This podcast is a production of the All Turtles Worldwide Media Empire. It was recorded in the alarmingly traffic-free San Francisco Bay Area. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes, send us an email to hello@all-turtles.com. Marie reads every message. Thanks to everyone who made this episode possible, including Jim Metzendorf for editing, Marie McCoy-Thompson for producing, Chris Plug for his audio expertise, Micah Rivera for our artwork, and Matt Ammerman for our theme music. On behalf of Jessica Collier, Phil Libin, and yours truly, John Cifuentes, and the rest of the All Turtles team, thanks for listening.